I'm with you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here today and taking time out of your busy schedule to come in and share your time within the military. Today's date is June 30th, 2025. Starting off, what is your name?
Matthew Hallgarth.
Awesome. And when and where were you born?
1963, January, in McPherson, Kansas.
Wow.
My parents are Kansas people, so.
Incredible. Who are your parents and what were their occupations?
Bob and Gail, Robert and Gail, and they were a third of a graduating class of 6 from a small Kansas wheat town. And my dad was a first-gen college student who went to Wichita State and then Kansas State. And then his dad died when he was 4, and a coach told him in high school when he was making C's and D's, he says, you know, I think you could do college if you wanted. And so he took it to heart, and he went to college, would drop out every once in a while and work on drilling rigs to save money and then go back to school. And then he ended up getting degrees in chemical and mechanical engineering. And he spent his career working for Mobil Oil before Exxon bought them. Started at a refinery in Kansas and then moved around the country to different refineries doing projects for Mobil. So
Incredible.
my mother didn't work. She had some business training, but she was a stay-at-home mom generally, which I enjoyed. She was a good mom, always there, taking us to practices and stuff.
It's absolutely incredible. What primary and secondary schools did you attend?
Several, because we moved around. I guess growing up, I moved around about every 3 or 4 years, which made the military life pretty easy for me. Public schools in Kansas, New Jersey, California, and Houston. I went to high school the first 2 years in Southern California because my dad worked for a refinery there in a town called Torrance. And then my last 2 years were in Humble, Texas, down by Houston, and we lived in a town called Kingwood, just north of there, across the San Jacinto River. And then from there I applied to Baylor, TCU, and UT, and decided on Baylor, so I went to Baylor.
What made you pick Baylor?
UT was too big. I always liked, I did a lot of church activities as a kid, other than playing sports. TCU and Baylor were kind of in that thing, but Baylor was about half the price at the time. TCU was always more expensive, although they were similar, about 10,000 students, about like Tarleton is now. And yeah, private. Went to Baylor from 81 to 85, met my wife there in 84, and interestingly got a bachelor's in philosophy.
Wow. And you use that today?
That's why I'm here. I'm a philosophy professor, so.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it was a long road to get there. It was interesting how that happened.
Yes. Did you have any jobs outside of the military prior to, did you enlist? Were you?
No, you don't enlist into officer training. I was an officer, so there are 3 ways to get commissioned. You can go to the academy, like West Point or the Air Force Academy or the Naval Academy. You can go to an ROTC program, or you can go to officer training school, which is an intense 90 to 120 day, beat you up and change you into a military person drill. I hadn't thought about the military, but when I graduated, I didn't really want to go to grad school at the time, and I was kind of floundering. So my dad suggested I give it a try because it would only be 4 years. If I didn't like it, I could get out. So I went ahead and tried. It was kind of hard. Took me about a year to get in because there's physicals, tests, all sorts of things. But during the Reagan drawdown toward the end of the 80s, they were kind of paring back the military. And I was fortunate. I worked through the people in Fort Worth when I applied. And they took 3 applicants out of 35. And I somehow got in. But I had friends. My grandfather, who lived in Burke Burnett, I don't know if you know where that is, that's up by Wichita Falls. Mm-hmm. He worked at Shepherd Air Force Base, so I had a retired lieutenant colonel up there that I was friends with from my grandparents' church who wrote me a letter, and a chief master sergeant, which is the highest rank you can get in there, and then another colonel that I knew who wrote me letters. And then I did well on the tests and stuff. And they took me. They didn't take me for pilot training because my eyes and things, I just didn't qualify. So I didn't really care. But the thing I'm grateful for is that the military was necessary for me personally as a growing up thing.
Absolutely.
It made me grow up, forced me to be part of a team and just all the stuff you've heard. But just kind of aimless at the time, and then got in there and, here's how you're dressed, here's how you cut your hair. Oh, good, thank you. I can just do what I'm told and stuff. The training's pretty rigorous. When I went to officer training school, they washed out probably 30%. Marines, it's 50. So, they kind of beat on you and want to get rid of people. They want to get rid of people who don't take to it, right? Or
Absolutely.
They can't, they either don't have the aptitude for it, or they don't handle the stress well. So they pick on you to see what you're going to be. And if you hold up, you get to graduate. I was 25 when I went in. You asked me about jobs. I don't know about, it's kind of interesting to me because I talk to people your age, and people your age are always looking for internships and stuff. And, when I grew up, I sacked groceries, I waited tables, I delivered lazy boy chairs in a van. I worked for a home restoration group and learned a lot about the trades, lots of stuff like that. In college, I worked for an oil pipeline crew as a welder's helper and did lots of things like that. Hot, dirty, oily summer work, but it made good money for college. While I was waiting for I had a date to go into officer training school, and it was about 8 months out, so they were forecasting ahead. So I was in Waco, kind of waiting, and I got a job at the M&M Mars candy plant in Waco.
That's
and
sweet.
It paid, yeah, really. Well, for what it's worth, they did Snickers, Twix, Skittles, and Starbursts there. And I was on the Twix line. And they had a deal that if you worked up to 1,000 hours, you didn't get benefits. And I didn't need benefits. I just needed to make a living until I went to officer training school. So I stayed in shape and stuff, and I worked at the candy factory, and I did well. And then when I hit my 1,000 hours was about the time I went into officer training school, which at the time was in San Antonio. Now they've moved it to Montgomery, Alabama, but it used to be at Lackland. And I went down there and let them turn me into somebody else, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. But I have a lot of job experience. I've done a lot of different things.
It's always interesting to see kind of where the veterans that we've interviewed go prior to going into the service. And usually it's jobs like you said, working at a grocery store. It's never full-on careers, usually.
Something, yeah. I had, when I graduated from Baylor with my philosophy degree, just one more thing, they had offered me a fellowship to stay and do graduate school there. But I was just tired of it. So the military ended up being sort of an alternative. So, and then when you take your Air Force or your military tests, they test you really well because they want to know where your aptitudes are. So when I took the military test, I wasn't that good at mechanical things. You know, I can figure out stuff and do a starter or whatever. You know, I do my own oil, but gears and things, they want to know if they want you to be a maintenance officer or a contracting officer or an academic or a trainer or whatever. So I did real well on the verbal and the writing and the comprehension and everything, but and really good on the math, but not as good on the mechanical. So based on your scores, they go, all right, well, you're going here because you're good at that. And so they have a nice, as a philosopher, I understand that because, you know, Plato, even in his Republic, would say that you want people to go where they're best suited, because if they're doing things they're good at, they'll be happier.
Absolutely.
And more content, right? So that's kind of how it works.
So what made you choose the Marine Corps?
Air Force.
Air Force, excuse me.
That's okay. I never had, growing up, I never had that, you know, I want to be in the infantry and go kill people sort of attitude. And I always had thought the Air Force was a better fit for me. My grandfather had served in the Air Force. I knew I wanted to have a family someday, and I figured that Air Force I knew would be better for family life, because you're not like 6 months a year gone on a Navy ship or as much. So it was sort of selfish in a way, and because I had cousins and stuff, and most of them that didn't go to college, they all went in the Army or the Marines. So my grandfather, I have a long military family history. My grandfather, of course, was in World War II in the Navy. My Uncle Max was in the Army. My Uncle Perry was in the Army. My Uncle Gordy was in the Navy. My Uncle Dwight was in the Navy. They were all serving in World War II. And I later learned, you know, I had family members that fought for the Indiana regiments for the North and the Civil War and all this sort of things going back, and it was nice to know, right? So it's kind of a legacy thing. Absolutely. So, yeah, the Air Force was a better fit for me. I wouldn't say it's for smarter people. That's not necessarily true. It's just it never crossed my mind to consider any of the other ones.
Nice.
I couldn't have done Navy. I get seasick real easy, and that's a bad thing. I wish I didn't, but because I love fishing, but just don't have the right ears or something for it. Inner
Absolutely.
ear. Lakes are fine, but you get out in the swells and I'm hurling, so forget it.
Yes. What was your most vivid memory from your training?
Officer training school? I guess it was my most vivid memory was when I first arrived there, because I showed up there. I had to report at 5 a.m. on a certain day in November of 1987. And I showed up and I saw all these people marching in the dark with these flashlights with these things, and they were marching to breakfast or something. And when I was there, right when I drove up the car, some trainee in one of the lines blew a gasket and just went crazy. And they had to take him away. And I was like, and I had just drove up, and I drove up just in time to see a guy lose his mind. And I went, good Lord, what am I getting into? This was sort of what happened. Officer training school is kind of a blur because it's very regimented. The attention to detail. You give up your dignity, not in a bad way, but you have to, everything has a purpose. So the reason they have you up at 5 a.m. cleaning the hair around the toilets in the men's room is, it's part of training, but it's also part of health and hygiene and making sure people don't get sick and taking care, and brass sewing, all these things, in making your bed a certain way and taking care of your haircuts and dressing just so. It's all about making sure you don't get sick, weak, all the marching. And the standard military argument is that they want to turn you from a me machine into a we machine, right? And so that when you're told to do something, you just do it. You don't think about it. Unless it's immoral or illegal, generally. But the overwhelming pressure is to do what you're told. Even if it's absurd, so they'll make you do absurd things. But they just want to make sure that you're, and that's part of the stress. They want to put you under mental stress. Well, this is stupid, you know. Yeah, well, maybe. But this might save the guy's life on the other side of the ridge. So you don't know this. They want you to accept that you're part of a bigger machine, and so it's kind of useful in that way. Officer training school in the Air Force is broken into two phases. The first half, 6 weeks or 10 weeks or whatever, is your lower class. And then the second, your upper class. And the upper class have responsibilities for training the lower class, so you have this overlap. So by the time you get through 6 weeks, then you have responsibilities for the new people who are being, or you could say the first 6 weeks is break down and then build up, or, you know, unpack what needs changing and then rebuild what needs building for
Absolutely.
Serving. So any coach or anybody will do that. You're trying to build a team. You're going to break somebody. You're going to undo what's bad, and you're going to try to turn them into a kind of fighting force or team or group or whatever. But that requires a little bit of pain and suffering if you want to do it well.
Yes. You mentioned on your testing, they try to look for your aptitudes. Based upon your scores, what specialty did you go into?
Well, I made like 90 something on my verbal stuff, so they had me doing, had me doing more cerebral things. For some reason, the first job I was given was a special duty assignment as a protocol officer for a 2-star general. And that means that when the general would visit, would have other generals come in, or he'd have to do retirement ceremonies, or he'd have a senator drop by because he wanted to, or the Speaker of the House from DC or something, or the head of this, Queen Elizabeth came to our base once. That was a big deal. You have to take care of all the arrangements so that everything is smooth, right? People need to know, like when the Queen lands, that you don't touch her, right? You don't touch the Queen. You bow or you say hi, but you don't give her a hug. You know, one of our Hispanic organizational ladies from San Antonio City gave her Queen Elizabeth a hug, and she was very gracious, but that was a big mistake. You just don't touch the Queen, right? Mm-hmm. And lots of space shuttle would come in and land, and we'd have to take care of that, or when it would come in and refuel and go out, and there was a lot like that. And then, but that was only a special duty. And then after about a year, they transitioned me to, I became a contracting officer. A contracting officer is somebody who can create contracts that obligate the government to spend money on certain things. So for a long time I worked on contracts for research and development, foreign military sales contracts, repair and overhaul contracts, because, you know, it could even be spare tires for B-52s. Every roll of toilet paper on a military base, every construction project, every part that goes to every starter that gets replaced on an F-16 is tied to a contract. And somebody who has the authorization to do those, take care of those things. In fact, Tarleton, if you were to go over to the right office, they have a whole procurement or purchasing department. Take care of everything. They manage the supplies for everything, and they take care of the property and the equipment. And if somebody's out here mowing, there's probably a contract. If it's not done in-house, it's farmed out or something. Most of the things that the military does, some contracting officer bought and worked with scientists and dealt with the lawyers to figure out, research, test, and develop those bombs that blew up the nuclear sites in Iraq recently, which I know you've been following probably. 30,000-pound bombs that penetrate 300 feet of concrete and blow up nuclear sites that are dropped from B-2s. The contracting officer buys ordnance, buys bullets, takes care of everything. So what's called a contracting officer's warrant is a permission. I had an unlimited warrant, which meant I had the right to obligate the government to spend money, right? So, and everything over 100,000 or 500,000 had to be legally reviewed. And then if you had to make a change to a contract, you had to do a modification, and there were all these processes. It's not a glamorous job, but
it's important.
It's an important job because they're not just going to let anybody obligate the government to to spend money. They're not going to let a platoon captain buy his bullets. That's going to come somewhere else. So when you said training earlier, I don't know, I probably went to 10 contracting courses in different places all over the country. It was interesting as part of getting certified. I was a flight commander for a contracting squadron in Omaha for 3 years, and worked on strategic command, which is a joint command there, which does in charge of our nuclear stuff. We had I had a little group that, I don't know, we had probably $150 million worth of contracts just in my little group for everything from, nuclear switches probably to paint. It just depended.
So they don't split it amongst categories, or it's just overall all the purchases?
Well, they have it broken up. We had in our group, you have base contracting, which takes care of construction services like if you hired somebody off base to come in and do your janitorial service or clean your runway of tire marks so you could have a good runway or whatever. Everything done, even the laundry on base to take care of the airmen's uniforms for them would be a contract. Everything is a contract. This building there's a contract here for your power, your lights, and I don't know how it works with the state and A&M system and stuff, but they have one. And somebody manages that. And it's one of those things behind the scenes. Just like if you went downtown to the hospital, there would be a contracting person there, because if they're out of antibiotics or saline solution or something, the contracting person has to get it. The doctor doesn't know where to get it. He just wants it there when he needs it to save somebody, right?
Absolutely.
Where's my Tylenol? Somebody has to buy it. So ironically, well, it's not glamorous. It's sort of the behind the scenes business machinery that keeps the military running. It's also useful if you want to get out, because contracting people, of course, are trained and they're in demand by defense contractors like Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics, the Lockheed Martin plant in Fort Worth. They would be hiring people like me once we retire to go over and do the other side, subject to certain laws and restrictions, so there's no conflict of interest. But one of the ironies about contracting is that when the first and military, Army, every military has, even the Coast Guard has its contracting people. When you deploy somewhere like Iraq or Afghanistan or wherever you're going, contracting people are generally some of the first people to go with everybody. You just don't hear about them, but somebody has to go over there and set up stuff. So when I would deploy, we would generally be out in the front, and then the camp where it's not glamorous, but the camp where the people are serving and living in tents, somebody has to get a contract to make sure that porta potties are brought in, or else they're pooping out in the sand, and the water bottles and everything, and so many things, mess tents. Who's gonna feed these people, right? where are they going to get their new ammo or new boots when their boots break down because they've been out marching. So all these things are, an army runs on its logistics, on its stomach. If you don't take care of those things, then they're more likely to lose, right? If the planes don't have parts, tires, brakes, and people who know how to fix them, well then they're not going to be airborne, and they're not going to be able to refuel the B-2s who need to get over to Iran and blow up the nuclear plant, right? So it's a complex system with a gazillion moving parts, and to coordinate all that is what makes the military special, because everything, they train the crap out of you so that when time comes for something serious like that, hopefully everything is working like a well-organized home or a class, only 100 times more complicated, right?
Did you go on it? You mentioned that they'll send y'all overseas. Where all did you go?
I avoided deployments because most of the time during my career we weren't at war. But in the 90s, I deployed to Bosnia. You ever heard of that?
I've heard of it.
Bosnia is a part of what used to be Yugoslavia. And in the 90s, when their communist leader died, it broke into Croatia, Bosnia, Serbia, Macedonia, Slovenia, Kosovo, and it just became a civil war. There were genocides and everything. So NATO, I went with NATO, which was European North Atlantic Treaty Organization. I went with a NATO group down to Bosnia, and after we got them to kind of quit killing each other, we went in there and became sort of the referees. And we, of course, contracting people were important because everything was bombed. There was mines everywhere, and there was lots of hostility and bitterness. So we were down there spending money and watching the Serbians to make sure they didn't kill the Bosnians. And there was sort of what we call a peacekeeping mission, but it was nasty. Silly contract we had in our office. I worked with the NATO office. My sidekick was Gunny Sergeant, Marine Corps, Hepler. He and I had a Land Rover, and we would drive around Bosnia doing contracts. Oftentimes would have $10,000 or $20,000 in my pockets, in my BDUs, and we would go around and make contracts. We took care of contracts for the American spies who were listening in on the Serbian communications, and we took care of several camps of soldiers. We bought IT equipment from Bosnian startup companies to try and get their economies going again, and dealt with banks and different things just to try to resuscitate what was really just a bombed out hulk, just kind of like a Marshall Plan for the Balkans. And that was interesting. And then my boss was Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Army, and then we worked for I don't know who was above us, but we worked. And interestingly, we stayed in a camp that, and we do this a lot. You ever seen shipping containers around? Mm-hmm. Well, the military uses shipping containers for places to stay. So what we would do is you go in there, you create a contract, and you go in there and you'd stack shipping containers, say 3 high, and then build a staircase in a hallway between them, and you just, each of those shipping containers might have one window put in it and some electrical outlets. So you go in there, and we had an oil space heater and a fluorescent light, and that's where we stayed. And then there was a community shower and a tent with workout equipment, so you could go lift weights and stuff. But it was really austere, if you will. And then we worked over in Bosnia. We worked over in a little town near Sarajevo called Ilidza, and we worked at the hotel area. It wasn't nice, but it was there where the Archduke Franz Ferdinand had stayed before he was assassinated in 1914 by the Bosnian Gavrilo Princip. Well, if you remember, Franz Ferdinand was an Austro-Hungarian, comes down to Bosnia, gets him, he's the heir to the Australian Habsburg throne, comes down to Bosnia, gets assassinated, and through all the alliances, that's how World War I starts. So I actually got to see the corner in Sarajevo where he was killed, and, you know, just historical, interesting stuff. And the Winter Olympics were in Sarajevo in 1984. And the ski area with the luge and all the runs and everything were all bombed out, blown up. You could see it, mined and everything. But when the snow got deep, we were there over the winter. Me and the gunny sergeant went over there and skied because they were trying to open some runs. So we went over there one day in our camos.
Skied at the Olympics.
We skied at the Olympics. It was weird. Because we had all our Gore-Tex gear and stuff for the winter, and it was fun. So we got our Land Rover and went skiing. Yeah, so that was kind of fun.
Mm-hmm. Did y'all go and do cool historical or, you know, just kind of explore frequently?
No, not generally. When you're deployed, you work real hard. So we worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, unless there was some emergency that required more. So we only had 1 day off. This is another thing. The military's good. They have this group called MWR. You ever heard of that? Mm-hmm. It stands for Morale, Welfare, and Recreation. So every couple of days, MWR would send boxes in, and you'd be in your tent trying to do your work with your computer and do contracts and write purchase orders for various local businesses or the IT equipment for the spies who are watching the Serbs or whatever, or the auto lease contracts for this group or whatever. And you'd get boxes in from MWR, and they would be groups of like a pile of letters from third graders from schools in America writing. Your teachers would make them write a letter to a soldier, right? So you'd grab 3 or 4 of these, and you'd read them. Well, we appreciate what you do, and they write their little flag on there and stuff. But it was kind of nice. We didn't have cell phones back then, so as readily. So in order to talk to my wife and kids, I would have to. I had a way. I forget. I made a call to some kind of switchboard in Kentucky and got through to my wife. She was staying in Omaha with the family, so every few days I could talk to her for a little while. The time difference, you'd have to work that out. And then the other thing that MWR would do was they would send fiction books. So, you know, when you were, if you weren't over, we had a little MWR tent, or I wouldn't call it a building, it was a shack, but we had an MWR tent where we had a popcorn machine and a TV, and we could watch movies and different things, or play cards or whatever. They do those sorts of things. And then a little BX where you could go get a candy bar or something, and a mess hall where you would go get food. Because it was NATO, the food was kind of weird, because they ate a lot of lamb and stuff, which was weird. You know, we don't eat lamb much. But the MWR would send in boxes of fiction, so I discovered several authors. I didn't used to read fiction, but when I was deployed and I was off and it was snowing and I was bored, I would read fiction, and I got into certain authors. And so when I'm not doing philosophy, which is my job here, I like to read fiction.
Absolutely.
Because of my deployment experience. I know how to entertain myself if I'm bored, so I'll get some books and start reading.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like your college experience helped you to be successful in the military?
I don't know. I didn't think about the military much when I was in college. I would say no, not much. I would say my upbringing more than that. If you have good parents, like my dad, you know, if you start something, he'd make sure you finished it. You know, if you made a commitment, he made sure you followed through. If your mother, you know, we take care of our room, we take care of our hygiene, we brush our teeth, we had order in my house, and my parents loved each other and were peaceful and were easy to be around, and they didn't fight much, and they didn't have too many bad habits, so it was a good upbringing. And so the idea of there being structure was easy. So when I go to college, if you say, did college, well, when I went to college, if you have a class, you go to it, you do your laundry, you take care of your bills, you get a part-time job if you need to, you do what you have to do. I mean, you're just taught to do that. By the time I got to college, had had several part-time jobs, and I knew what it was like to be on time and be ready for work and stuff. So, and I would guess maybe sports is more important to the military life than anything, because you're part of a team and you have to get in shape and you have to listen to your coach and you have to do what you're told. And if you don't, there's a merit-based system. If you're not successful, they pull you out and they sub you in. If you're sick or you can't go, they get rid of you. So there's a lot of things in life that fit pretty easily with military life. It's just the military life is a more serious game, right? Mm-hmm. But like family life or college life or work life, there are certain aspects of it. Be on time, be clean, look people in the eye, do what you say you'll do, tell the truth. I mean, these things are stressed more in the military, and the consequences for failure are more serious, but they don't. Life is life, isn't it? When you think about it. Failure in the military is, those people will often be failures in life, because, you know, if they don't like being told what to do, then they won't like being told what to do by their boss in a company or anything else. So it's about character, really.
Were there any particularly humorous events during your service that you want to share about? I'm sure there's plenty.
Would you specify between, I mean, you have lots of laughs. I had, for example, those of us in the military who played golf, we played in military scrambles, which is like, you know, best ball thing like they do around here for fundraisers. When you go, you always find people that you're close to. I had a lieutenant working for me in Omaha who I was real close to. He looked in on my family while I was overseas. He and I just texted each other yesterday. We're still friends. He got out after 10 years and went to University of Chicago and got an MBA, and now he works for a defense contractor in Virginia because he was a contracting guy, right? I was his best man at his wedding. Every Friday we would, when work was over, we would go out on the porch. We were in this old part of the base that used to be a fort back in the frontier days, and we had this big porch. And we'd set chairs out on the porch, and we would have some scotch and a really nice cigar, and we would sit and just BS. He and I ran a half marathon together. We ran together quite a bit. He was younger, so he's in better shape, but we both did a few 10Ks, and we did some charity work that way, and we each took care of each other's vehicles when we were both deployed. We'd deploy at different times. He went to Kosovo and went to, I think he went to Saudi Arabia once, which I didn't want to do. I actually had a choice. This is interesting. They tried to get me to go to Haiti in the Caribbean. Haiti was having trouble and they needed somebody to go to Haiti. And I said, I don't want to go to Haiti. I wanted to deploy, but I said, I don't want to go to Haiti. I want to go to the Balkans, which is where Sarajevo is in Bosnia. I said, okay. And then you have the typical problem. Sometimes you'd have you'd have somebody working for you, and you'd say, well, it's your turn to deploy, and you'd say, well, my wife told me if I deploy again. Is it working? Mm-hmm. My wife told me if I deploy again, she's leaving. And you'd have this sort of personal intrigue and stuff you'd have to deal with, and well, you got to go anyway. You guys need to work it out, or else you find some single person who's wants to get out of town and they'll take your place or something. We had a lot of that. So you have to kind of, one guy in my shop was killed in the Kobar Towers bombing in 1996, so that's it's there. You just keep going.
I'm sorry for your loss.
What was interesting about my career, though, I told you I was a contracting officer, but that really was only a small part of it, because I was in San Antonio when I was a lieutenant, and I was working on a contract. And I got a phone call. And, you know, I figured it was just a business or somebody wanted to know the status of a bid or something, and I picked it up. And it turned out it was Captain somebody from the Air Force Academy. And he said, "Are you Lieutenant Hallgarth?" And I said, "Yeah." "What can I do for you, Captain?" He said, "Well, do you have a BA in philosophy?" And I said, "Our records show that you do." I said, "Yes, I do." "Yeah, we saw that." He said, "Would you be interested in teaching philosophy at the Air Force Academy?" And I said, "Okay. What does that entail?" He said, "Well, we fly you out here. We'd have to have you do an audition because we don't just let anybody teach at the Air Force Academy." And I said, "Yeah, I'm willing to try out if you need somebody. I'd love to do that." And when I told my wife, she said, "Yeah, you got to do that. That's for you." And this was 1991, so I flew out to the academy and I gave a lecture, and the colonel met everybody in the philosophy department. They had philosophy and fine arts was one of their departments. It was wedged between political science and psychology, which they called behavioral science. And I gave a talk and I answered some questions, and they went out of the room and came back in 5 minutes and they said, "You're hired." So the Air Force sent me to get my master's that fall. So instead of contracting, I had been working to go get a master's in contracting over in Dayton, and I was going to stay in that field. So I just thought, well, this is my job, and this is what people in my job do. They go for further training. And then, so they said, so I went from being a contracting officer in like 2 weeks. I got moved over to, I went to the University of Oklahoma and got my master's in philosophy in about 14 months, and then went out to the Air Force Academy and taught philosophy for 4 years.
And what years was that again?
92 to 96 or 97. And then while I was there, I was considered and accepted to go back and get my PhD and come back to the academy. The academy has to have a minimum of 35% PhDs on staff in order to keep their accreditation. So people who teach at the academy, if they want to compete have to compete for the slots to go get their PhD. So I'm doing my thing, and I get picked up for a PhD. So what I did was I went back to the contracting field and commanded a flight, which I've already told you about. But I did that so that I could make major. And then I went in for 3 years, went to graduate school on the Air Force at the University of Florida and did my PhD. Went back to the academy and worked and taught philosophy, military ethics, medical ethics, world religions, all sorts of stuff, American philosophy. And then retired in 2007, and because I had a PhD and had about 8 years of teaching experience and done some things, we always wanted to come back to Texas, so I got hired by Tarleton. And the only reason that I'm still a professor is because the Air Force decided to make me a professor. Mm-hmm. Right. So I was at the academy in Colorado Springs for about 8 years of my career. So contracting really only figured out to be about 6 years, and another 4 in graduate school, and then most of the time I was a professor. and then various other duties. You do different things. But so when I was going to retire, we wanted to go back to Texas, but I wasn't sure I was going to be able to find work. Maybe a junior college or something. I was either going to go back to defense contractor, or I was going to try for a professor job. My sister-in-law is a Tarleton grad. She went here in the 90s, back when it was a small place. And she called and she said, "Have you thought about Tarleton?" I said, "Tarleton? What's Tarleton?" She said, "That's where I went to school." I said, "No." And I looked up Tarleton on the internet, and they didn't have a philosophy department. I said, "Well, they don't have a department, but they probably have philosophy classes." So I said, "Well, usually the philosophy stuff is under English or something." Well, there's a gal that retired from here recently, Ann Callahan. Do you remember me, Ann Callahan? Mm-hmm. You know Ann? My sister-in-law babysat her children when they were younger. And she and my sister-in-law have been in contact ever since.
Small world.
She wasn't Purple Poo or anything, but she was a Tarleton, whatever they call them, ambassador or whatever they call you guys that are really go-getters. So Ann Callahan, I talked to Ann Callahan, and I sent my information, my vita, to Ann Callahan, and Ann Callahan sent my information over to the head of the English department, who at the time was Dr. Shipman, who I'm friends with now, play poker with once a month. He saw it, sent it down to Dr. Clifford, who was the one philosopher they had here. And he called me in 5 minutes, and he said, "Do you really want to teach here?" I said, "Yeah, I'm looking for work, and I'd love to get down to a regional university. And I'm from Texas, and I like it. My wife and I met at Baylor, and blah, blah, blah." And so he was head of the honors college for many years, and he gave me $1,500 to come down here, paid my expenses. I gave several talks. He made sure the deans, the provosts, everybody were there. And it took him about a year of wrangling and begging and cajoling, but he finally got them to hire me.
Wow.
And so when I retired from the Air Force, I had about a 6-month lag, and then I started here in 2008. But that's why I'm here. See, the military, because I got out of college, didn't want to go to grad school, went in the military. The military grows me up. The military turns me into a grown-up, and then in the process, it picks me up to teach at the Air Force Academy. All this stuff happened in spite of my stupidity, which is that's how life is. It just unfolds. You have to kind of accept it. I always say, when you're beating on doors and a window opens, make sure you dive through it. Just take it. So the Air Force taught me to teach, and now I'm here.
And you've been here 17 years? 16, 17 years?
Yeah, 2008, so yeah, 17. I'm tenured now, but I'm I'm in the American Legion Hall. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of veterans in the community. Ted Roberts and I are friends. And, 4th of July parades and everything. Tarleton is a military-friendly place, and it's nicely neutral. cares about teaching and not just research. You know, it's nice to I love it when I have ROTC people in my classes because I can talk to them about what they're going to do, and or when I see cadets or I see students, kids, young men especially, who I think have the right stuff for the military, but they're not thinking about it, I kind of try to plant a seed. I said, look, if you're not sure what to do, you only have to do it 4 years. Why don't you give it a try? So I write letters for people when if I can talk them into it, if I think. Just last semester, I had a kid, Sharp, he's in my logic class and made an easy A, great analytical thinker, big and strong, clear-eyed, but he couldn't get financial aid anymore because his mother remarried and it took him out of financial aid category, and he said, well, I'm going to enlist because I'm not going into huge debt to pay for my school. I said, don't do that. I said, you're too smart to be enlisted. So I said, what you need to do is go in the Guard or something and then finish your school, and then you can become an officer. And I put him in touch with Considine. Considine talks to him, says, yeah, he's the right kind of material. And so he got him a $20,000 bonus from the Guard in return for so much year service. So he's going to be in the Guard, and then he's going to finish his school, and then he can go in the military if he wants, or he can stay in the Guard. But he was anybody who can do logic and make a 98, because he just loves to solve problems, and he's really analytical, and he goes to the gym, and he's in good shape. You're like, okay.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people don't
got
realize.
my eyes open.
Yeah.
You too.
I think a lot of people don't realize that just because you're in college, graduated college, a lot of people are like, oh, well, I went to college, I can't really join the military now. I think that kind of is a misconception amongst people a lot of times.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of discussion about the fact that, you know, we're kind of aimless or we don't know what to do, and the military will kind of get you motivated, steer you in a certain way, kind of make you disciplined, make you, you don't have to stay in, but generally speaking, an honorable discharge is a good thing to have. The benefits are good, the pension's good. One of the reasons I'm able to live comfortably in Stephenville, because Tarleton doesn't pay great, so you end up you know, the pension, I don't have to pay for Tarleton health care because I already have that, and I get a certain amount from the VA because I've got bad knees and stuff from various injuries. So yeah, and I'm on the ROTC advisory board. I'm the what do they call it, faculty advisor for the Tarleton Veterans Association, because they need somebody, paper to, and they've got a thing over in the old Tarleton Center.
Oh yes,
they have a place where
building.
they can get together, and so
it's
there's
a really neat room.
Yeah,
Talking about the
is.
little hangout spot.
They've got a place where they can go and talk to each other and stuff, and this happens a lot. The thing about the military is that once they train you and you spend some time in it, that it sort of becomes a part of who you are. You can't really get it out of your system. So, you know, when you hear the national anthem at the basketball games or something, you stand up straight, and you just, there's a certain aspect to how it gets in your system and makes you have gratitude, unless you've got PTSD or something and you're kind of messed up. For most people, it's fairly, unless you're just cynical, it has a good effect on you. It makes you care about your country and stuff. And I liked it too because you have annual fitness tests. We stayed in shape. I was always, my kids, my son's an Eagle Scout. We did all that. My wife's a cancer survivor, and the military took care of all that and all the testing and stuff. So it's one of my daughters, and they're really good about that, about taking care of their folks. I taught wherever you go, you do different things, so you get to see different parts of the world. When we were in Colorado, I taught my kids to ski. I took them camping. We did trout fishing. We did scouting. We climbed 14ers, 14,000 foot. There's 55 of them in Colorado. In Omaha, we did different things. Hunted pheasants, doves, fished, did different things. So tried to use the military to give the kids a diverse set of experiences, right? Mm-hmm. And my daughter would have gone in, I think, if she hadn't had a health problem. But there's a guy here in this building who's like a retired Air Force Senior Master Sergeant.
I want to say it was the old dean and then, interim associate dean, and I think he retired. We had interviewed, he was actually our first interview.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, what other questions you got on there?
Do you feel like the military changed how you kind of perceived and interacted with people post-service?
Sure. First of all, if you meet somebody, if you're ex-military and you meet somebody who's been in the military and you hear that band of brothers talk, that cliche, there's sort of a truth to it, because there's the assumption is there's a certain sort of shared sense of training and stuff that makes you see the world differently. So you kind of have this link. It's sort of like if you met somebody in another town who was big into ag, I guess you're an ag person. If that's true, then there's sort of an instant bond. There's a lot of inter-service rivalries, right? So I have a friend who's a Marine. We chew on each other. Yeah. Hey, Jarhead, how you doing? And he said, "Hey, Chair Force." I said, "Yeah, if I had $1 for every time the Corps called the Air Force for help, I'd be rich, man," or something like that. So there's sort of, in some ways, a good-natured inter-service rivalry. Most of the people I know are kind of, unless depends on the person, but generally speaking, I think that most of us are kind of exhausted by the "thank you for your service" talk, because most of us don't think our service was exceptional in any way. We just did our jobs. Some people, I felt in some ways, some places I worked, I felt like I was just working for a corporation that had uniforms. Mm-hmm. In many ways, it's a corporation. It had its HR, it had its medical people, it had its contractors, it had its personnel, it had its dentists, it had everything. But on the other hand, it's different but similar, because certain human function, it had its chaplains, so it had its religious people, you know. I think that my opinion of that is that most of us just kind of, unless we're trying to shake people down for some reputational gain, most of us just kind of try not to wear it on our sleeve. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I feel when I see the guys wearing all their military stuff, or their Navy hat or whatever, you know, or their Air Force hat and all their unit stuff, I'm like, it's like you got out of the service, but you're not living anymore. You're just living in the past. Mm-hmm. Right. So I don't really think about it, because, you know, I've got work to do today. You know, I'm taking care of aging parents and trying to make sure my kids get a good start in life, and helping them when their sinks break or whatever. So I just kind of, I'm honored to have served. I'm grateful for it, and but I'm not really like trumpeting it all the time.
Yeah. But
I do want my students to know it, because it's an important part of who I am, and it gives you credibility. So I don't ever have any trouble handling discipline problems or anything in class, because you can just turn leadership on. You know, you've been taught how to do that, but it's, yeah, I don't understand that. I'm kind of concerned about AI and stuff. Are you letting ChatGPT do all your assignments?
No.
Please don't.
I don't
Please
trust
do your
it
own
enough.
work.
I will use it to revise emails. I'll use it for certain functions. ChatGPT, to me, as far as ag goes, we don't do a whole lot of writing anymore. I mean, once we kind of get up in our upper level classes, you don't do too much writing. So it's kind of hard to be like using ChatGPT.
It's more science.
It ends up being more work, because there's people who, of course, try it, and then you're like, it was more work to use ChatGPT and copy paste everything over and whatnot. So it's a lot easier to not use it, especially in ag, because it's kind of information you need to know. So
yeah, education is just like military. Nothing. There aren't really any shortcuts.
Yeah.
You can't get in shape by just taking a pill. You actually have to work at it. So most of the things, I've never been proud of anything in life that was easy.
Yeah.
If it's not hard, you're not. I did that, right?
Absolutely.
In the military, what's fun about it, and something I think maybe some other people you interview would corroborate this, is that the military does do one thing, is that they do teach, they do make people realize that they can do much more than they think they can do. If you were to go overseas to one of these bases, you would find that there would be 19-year-old kids right out of high school who've been trained, and they're managing $1 million worth of equipment, and they're taking care of a 50 caliber gun on a C-130 gunship, and they're doing the maintenance on it and stuff. And they're like, golly, a year ago I was just trying to get through English. I didn't realize I could do this. And you can do more than you think you can do.
Absolutely.
And but you have to be put under a little pressure. And when you fail, they say, all right, what'd you do wrong? Let's try it again. Let's try it again. Let's try it again. And after the 30th time, it's like, you got it, didn't you? You just persist. Persistence is important, and it's a good thing to have somebody beat some persistence into you.
I know you've mentioned you joined the Legion. Have you joined any other organizations as well?
I was Rotarian for many years, Rotary. We did lots of, they're a service organization. They've been around a long time. I was Rotary president and got a grant to replace the ceiling at the Legion Hall. So I was, because I was in both. So right now I'm just in the Legion because I got tired of Rotary, and after the COVID thing, groups like that, Rotary, Lions, Optimists, Legion, I don't know if Legion's going to survive eventually, because people in your generation aren't really interested in clubs like that anymore. Our dues are only $50 a year, and I've made some really nice friendships in the Legion. One of the things I like about the Legion or being around other military people or people at my church or whatever is that, academics are weird. Right? We academics are if you're just around academics, your view of the world is probably twisted. It's all about ideas and stuff. But, some of my best friends in the Legion one worked at FMC for 30 years, two of them drove trucks, one of them owned a business, the other one works at Comanche Peak. He was a submariner in the Navy.
Segura.
You know him, Robert?
He was here the other day, him and his wife.
Yeah, Robert's great. He'll talk your ear off, too. I'm sure he did. And they taught me how to, you ever play 42? Mm-mm. Oh, it's a domino game. It's really fun. I go to the senior center once in a while and play in 42 tournaments, and I do different things around town because it's nice to be around regular folks and not just academics.
Yes. Some diversity.
Oh yeah, totally. So I get a kick out of that.
Is there anything that you want future generations to know about your military service? I know you had said, you don't feel like your service was that remarkable, but
No.
just anything for future generations to know. I know a lot of veterans don't want to put themselves up on a soapbox, so to speak. But
No. I'd like future generations to know that if you're gonna risk the lives of servicemen, then you should do it for the national interest and not for silly reasons. Secondly, I think that I wouldn't go so far as to say we need mandatory service, like say in Norway or something. There are places where it's required. South Korea does it. All young men have to go into the military. But I think in many regards, a little military training would be good for the boys, especially. Although, girls can do it, women can do it too. I think, I don't know. I think it might, more service in that way would help with some of the malaise that some of our kids are facing right now, especially boys. They're not in the best way right now. They're playing games. They're not growing up early enough. They're not taking responsibility like they need to. Playing video games and stuff, and in some ways they've been beat up by the culture for a while, but I would like, if you feel that way, then try the military, get off your couch and go serve, and think about somebody besides yourself, and you'll be better off. The military is an interesting sort of symbiotic relationship, because when you go in the military, there's everybody's thank you for your service, but there's also a self-interest component. When you join the military, you probably need a job. You join the military because you need something to do, and you don't realize that in the training and in the serving that you become a better human being, but at the same time you get pay and benefits, and you get forced to be a grown-up. And then some people join because they want the GI Bill, and other people join because they want to go kill people. I mean, there's lots of reasons for joining the military. Some join because they want to run for office someday and they think it's an important resume line. There's lots of reasons to join. A lot of times, I kind of expected when I joined that it would be a 4-year thing. And then after 4 years, I kind of decided I liked it. And then it seemed like it was such an interesting culture with so much diversity and so many neat places to go and things to do. And, you know, with a mission that was noble. It wasn't just making money for your company. It was actually doing something higher. So, like being in the ministry or something, or being a professor. So, the fact that there's a selfish component to it doesn't, you know, even somebody who goes in to be a pastor is going to have to, has a self-interest component because they need to be paid for their work, right? Mm-hmm. You might go into you're probably going into an ag field because you like animals. But at the same time, you're going to be around kids for the next 30 years teaching them about animals. How to fatten them up, how to get the most out of their meat, how to make them healthy, how to appreciate nature. You're going to do all these things. So there's the selfish component. So there's a love component, a mutual giving and receiving in just everything. It's the same way with marriage. So we serve God, and God blesses us. You could go on and on, right? Mm-hmm. So the fact that this is like that doesn't mean that the service isn't important, but it is a sort of a mutual benefit situation.
Absolutely. So I know that the military had paid for, not necessarily paid, but
they did
pay for it for you during your service to go to your grad school. Did your kids, well spent, wasn't alive then, but did your kids get to use your benefits at all? In terms of education?
My son is a trauma nurse. He graduated from Tarleton in 2014, is a nurse. And he is in Fort Worth. And he did about half of his undergraduate was Hazelwood Act. You heard of that? Mm-hmm. I had the Montgomery GI Bill, and I converted it. What's interesting is when you get out of the military and you work long enough to get a pension, you have the GI Bill just like a 4-year person. And I had 10 years to use it. think.
Yeah, I think it's like 10 or 15.
So my son uses Hazelwood, but I couldn't give the GI Bill to one of my kids, but one of them got a scholarship and she was fine, and the other one, they both was presidential honors here or something. But so after about 5 years while I was here, I decided, well, I don't want to waste my GI Bill. So I went, while I was doing my philosophy work here at the academy, the Tarleton Academy, I worked at nights and online to get my master's in history from Tarleton.
Nice.
And I've never taught a history class here, although I could now, because now I have 2 masters, but I did that because I didn't want to waste my GI Bill. I was like, well, what can I do? I'll do a master's in history. I like history. So I did it, and it took about 3 years, just kind of working it on the side, and that was good. Yeah, and I enjoy when I first moved here, I had a student who was, you have these students, you ever had students in your class who are older people and they're coming back? And they're usually, I love these students because they're paying and they're serious and they do their work. Even if they make C's or B's, they're serious, so they're wonderful students. I had one like that, and she said, well, my husband is a Vietnam veteran, and he's one of these big bearded Duck Dynasty looking Vietnam vets. And I said, well, what about him? She said, well, I was asking about the VA, and she said, yeah, he goes to Brownwood, the clinic in Brownwood, because in Brownwood they've got a guy there named Dr. Childers, who's a really good doctor, and he was really the kind of person you'd want if you were gonna. So I go at the VA, I'm 50%, so I go to the VA once or twice a year let them take blood and check me out. And I started going to Brownwood, all because I met a Vietnam veteran spouse who told me about this particular doctor. And then when he retired, I was really sad because he was really good, because he really loved veterans and he was a good doctor. And if you had a problem, he'd send you down to Temple. There's a big VA hospital there next to Scott and White. He'd send you down there for a CAT scan or something. So all the meds I take, cholesterol and stuff, come from the VA because they're free. And then the VA keeps track of certain things. But then I also have another doctor over in Granbury that I see if I need something done. But yeah, it's been good. I've come across a lot of veterans over the years and the children of veterans that come here. A lot of students who are GI billers, and several years ago I had a student who was a really good student, and I found out he was a Marine from Huckabee up the road, and he got 2 or 3 Purple Hearts because he was in the Battle of Fallujah, which was door-to-door fighting in a town in Iraq. It was really nasty, and he was really just the kind of guy that has a right to brag, right? One of those kind. But he's held it together. He's got 3 kids. He's a good dude. So these people are around.
Absolutely.
What else you got?
Is there anything that you would like to add to the interview that we haven't covered yet?
Let me ask you, what do you think I've left out? You asked me about funny stories. I didn't really come up with any because they happen. They just sort of happen, right? I mean, we had a commander once, and he was fond of saying, "I appreciate your support." So when we had our Christmas party, I bought him a jock strap and made sure he got it for his gift. So he opened the jock strap, and when he showed it to the crowd, I said, "Thank you for your support." You know, just things like that happen a lot. And yeah. And then, of course, you know, in the military, when you figure out what each other's quirks are, then there's ruthless teasing and all that sort of thing, like, you know, in high school or whatever. Lots of things like that, but I'd have to sit here and think about it, and that
What would you
take too
say
long.
is the pinnacle of your time in the service? What would you say was your proudest achievement within the service?
Oh. Well, being a philosopher, that requires distinctions. I was really proud when I graduated with my PhD. I wrote a 385-page dissertation on military and medical ethics, and I really didn't think I had it in me. And I did it, and I stuck to it, and I did it. It took 3 years, and I knew I needed to do it because my kids and everybody, they gave me a short period of time. So I made sure I went to the ceremony and got hooded and everything because I wanted my kids to see it. I didn't care about it for myself, but I wanted them to see it. I was really proud of deploying because I just wanted to know what it was like. Yeah, I think that way. I look off, so it's not you. There's not a mouse over there.
No, it's okay.
No, it's just me. I do that. I was really proud of certain projects we did. There were times when we would be up against deadlines, and we would do certain things that required an immense amount of effort, and then it's kind of weird. Military has a habit of giving people ribbons and medals for achievements. And most of the things I did that I thought were heavy effort, things I was really proud of, I didn't get any medals for. But then I would get medals for doing stuff, for being associated with things, and I didn't do much. But I'd get the medal. So I always told myself, well, that medal is for this in my head. I'm getting that. I'm going to call that the medal I should have got for this. Now, it's obviously stupid for a person to work for a medal. That just sounds wrong. But if the culture gives them out, you know, you would hope that they would give them out for the right reasons, like heavy effort, right? I'm also proud of the fact that I was, despite the rigors of military service, was able to stay married for 35 years. My wife and I have a good marriage, and my kids, I did pretty good with the kids and showed them a lot of adventure and taught them how to do a lot of things, and I'm still on good terms with them. And they seem to have gratitude, which is really maybe one of the more important things in life, is gratitude. None of us are alone. We all need each other's help, right?
Absolutely.
I'm proud of other things, like stupid. While I was at the academy, I never really liked heights that much, but I decided I wanted to conquer that. So I made some calls, and I got the academy as parachute training for the cadets. So while I was at the academy, I found out that they had some open slots during the winter, and I got myself into the parachute training class as a captain. So I went through the parachute training and got my jump wings, and my family come out and watch me do my jumps and stuff. And that was, you're like, you know, the first time you're like, they train you so hard in the military that when they say you're up, you just do it. Then the second time you're like, oh my God, what did I just do? And then later on you're like, this is fun. And after a while it starts to become cool. And that's just one of those examples of like, that scares the crap out of me. Oh, that's not so bad. Won't you do it? Right? So there are just lots of things like that. If they want you to do something, they'll teach you to do it. And you'll find out that if you persist, you can probably do it. Right? So.
My cousin's actually deathly afraid of heights. She's just graduated Air Force Academy 2 years ago.
Oh, really?
And ended
How
up
nice.
joining their little club for that because she loved it so much.
They have a jump team.
She joined the club, so she wasn't on the jump team.
Yeah.
She didn't quite make it that far, but
That's
she was
all right.
kind of in their little club around it. So.
Yeah, I always was willing to, always had an adventuresome spirit. For example, they also had gliders. Did your friend do those? They had gliders, so they had these Cessnas, and they pull these gliders up on a string, and they pull you up, and you
She
be at the.
definitely did gliders, and then she's actually in Wichita Falls now, awaiting pilot training.
Oh, very cool. That's Euro-NATO joint jet training. That's a NATO. They get NATO. That's good. Did she say what her plane was going to be?
She did not. If I had to guess, it's probably going to be along the lines of cargo.
I would rather have done that.
Yeah.
Something
My
big
uncle
and
flew.
slow.
He flew
Yeah.
Casey's, and so he was also Air Force Academy, and now my other cousin's there and just got pilot as well. So.
I was actually on the admissions panel
Really?
when I was there, and we would score packages. Did they have and if you are like what'd you say, your cousin? If your cousin had a relative who went there, and you got extra points, because the assumption was they knew the culture and that they would be more adaptive and less likely to fail. Right? So if you had a parent that went there, then you got like 40 extra points, and they have a way of scoring legacy things. And it wasn't because of political connections. Did they have a representative or a senator or somebody write a letter?
They did.
I forget how that works.
They did, but I want to say they also did, what was it? There's also ways for people who kind of moved around a lot. Why do I want to say it's like the presidential or whatever? And so they kind of combat for that. So I want to say they took that route. Because they moved every 2 to 3 years. So they did that. older cousin, she kind of always had an itch, didn't know what she wanted to do.
That was
Kind of
me.
saw Air Force come in because she was always real close with it, with her uncle and everything. Younger cousin, he's my age, never quite saw that one coming. Last we had heard, he was actually going to Notre Dame. And then all of a sudden we saw a Facebook post that he was going to Air Force Academy. So, but they're a big Air Force Academy family. Even before the two cousins went, they were always at the games and going, so.
I don't think I would have liked that.
Yeah.
The sacrifice is so high. I guess it's quite an honor to be from there, and if they spend 4 years there and they survive, they are really special and different.
Yes.
Very different. Intense, driven, the usual thing. But you can become a lieutenant in 90 days. You don't have to go for 4 years.
Yes.
So that's an interesting, you do have to have a bachelor's to be an officer, but doesn't have to be there. Used to be, when you went to the Air Force Academy, you got what was called a regular commission, which was a special kind of commission. And when you were ROTC or OTS, which I did, you got a reserve commission, and then which was a lower level. And then at the certain point in your career, you went up and you were selected for regular. And a regular means you're on a certain mandatory presidential list of official officers. Reservers were extra, but regular were like, and even when you retire, like me now, I'm on some roster somewhere, I'm what they call the individual ready reserve. So if the Chinese invaded tomorrow, theoretically, they could call me up. So this is an existential fight for the Republic. We need you. And because I'm 62 and have bad knees, they put me at a typewriter, but I'd be helping, right? Or doing something, or contracting or something.
Yes.
Yeah. Another person you might consider, I need to look at your list, but have you talked to Kenny Weldon?
We have not.
I think he may be at Collier. He was working at Collier. He was Stephenville mayor for many years. He went to Stephenville High School, and then he went to the Air Force Academy, retired as a full colonel, and was a civil engineering guy. And he did some deployments, so you probably want to talk to him. He's about 6'7". He played basketball at Stephenville, and then went to the academy.
They just hire tall people over there at Collier?
I don't know. The Collier himself's pretty tall.
I know. I'm like,
yeah, but Kenny Weldon, Colonel Weldon was, and he was actually head of the Corps of Cadets for a while, or the ROTC or something. Corps of Cadets, and then he moved on, but he's a good one to talk to.
absolutely.
All right.
What would you like people to remember about your story?
What would I like people to remember about my story? I was just a guy who was sort of aimless but had potential in the military. Both grew me up and taught me that I could achieve if I would just focus. They gave me opportunities I would not have had otherwise. And if you're in that position yourself, you might want to give it a try.
Incredible. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day and sharing about your service.
It was an honor to talk to you, and I appreciate it, and I hope if I see you around campus, you'll give me a wave.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you.